presentations, but feel free to use the chat to share your question in the meantime. We'll be monitoring that and channeling that to the moderator during the Q&A segment. But alternatively, you can also use the raise hand function during the Q&A session itself to ask your questions live or share your insights. This is a knowledge sharing space, so we welcome your contributions to enrich the conversation as well. And lastly, if you have any issues, any technical issues, feel free to message the chat. And without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to Philip for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ling, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, perhaps as well. I would like to really welcome you to what should be a truly interesting seminar. And I think that I know why my governance colleagues have invited me for this seminar, because I often tell them I'm an economist, but I do believe that 90% or more of the development challenge ahead of us is not an economic challenge. It is purely a governance challenge. And with that, I refer to the inability to govern effectively. We're sort of interested in two things in particular. We're interested in sparking among stakeholders the interest in change by nurturing political will, but also to deliver change more effectively among bureaucracies. More effectively, with that we mean more continuously, more consistently, and more comprehensively. Now, governments across the Asia-Pacific region, but we can actually broaden this up and apply it to the entire world, are currently facing three critical challenges. The first is that relative to aspirations, we are massively under-delivering on the development agenda. And that's perhaps best exemplified by looking at the progress rate on our sustainable development agenda, the agenda of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which as of this year is only about 18%. And we need to reach this by 2030. Only 18% of the targets are going according to plan. So we are well behind relative to those aspirations we set out in 2015. A second feature of the global environment that we're currently facing is that populations around the world are facing heightened human insecurity. Now, we see this very much translated in our region, Asia Pacific, in the form of job insecurity. If you look at recent surveys from the World Values Survey, actually, from the World Economic Forum, you see that about between 50 and 75% of adult populations report being highly job insecure. They're fearful of losing their job and not being able to find a new one. And the third feature of this more difficult global environment is that we are facing now a far more turbulent development landscape as we look to the future. We are in a situation where existential risks, such as climate change, pandemics, biodiversity loss, are combining with fresh headwinds to economic growth and job creation in the form of slower globalization, the productivity reducing effects potentially of demographics, and also intense technological change. And thirdly, we are also seeing growing risks to governance itself in the form of growing polarization, inequality, democratic backsliding, and so on. So that's the sort of a cocktail of various risks that are overlapping. Now, don't get me wrong. It's easy to be discouraged by that environment of greater challenges, but in every challenge also lies opportunity. For example, demographics, insofar as we're talking about population aging, presents opportunities for older societies to live longer and more healthy lives filled with purpose and connection. Similarly, when we think about AI, which clearly can present an existential risk, it also presents an existential opportunity to solve other existential risks. And even a slowdown in globalization is not exactly mirrored in a reduction in the scale of opportunity. I mean, just people are excessively focused on, for example, the growth rate of China, which is now half of what it was 10 years ago. But look, even at half the growth rate, China is adding every couple of years a new Brazil or a new South Korea to the global economy. So it's not for the lack of absolute opportunity. So this is the backdrop. We have massively unmet aspirations, heightened levels of insecurity, and the prospect of greater turbulence ahead of us. A huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity. So against this backdrop, UNDP in Asia Pacific decided to launch Project Vision. This is an initiative designed to chart a path forward, to encourage countries to start and, more importantly, sustain future-oriented reform. Yeah? And it's entirely grounded in governance. So as part of this project, we have started an activity regarding future-ready governance. And we have developed this as a partnership between UNDP and the Chandler Governance Group. We are going to develop an index and a diagnostic tool. It is built on the idea that we need to be more anticipatory in the sense of seeing better what is coming at us in the future. We need to be more adaptable in the sense of changing our mindset when new information emerges or new priorities arise, and then more agile in terms of playing closer to the ball and being quicker to act upon these shifts in mindset. And over an implementation period of about a year, we go planning to pilot this initiative in about 5 countries. So that's it for me. I just wanted to paint the broader backdrop, that changing development landscape, and then within that, our project vision and this activity. And I'd be very curious to hear what you all think. Do you agree with the diagnostic that we need to focus far more on governance? And within that arena, what are, in your view, the most pressing constraints to governance? And what would be your recommendations as to how we should design this activity on future ready governance so that we can best tackle them? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Philip, for the warm and very substantive welcome and framing for today's discussion. So now I'll hand it over to Diana for her introduction to how UNDP's thinking around dynamic governance looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Ling, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us and for your interest. And thank you, Philip, for setting kind of the bigger backdrop framework for today's conversation. I'll spend, I hope, no more than 5 minutes, because we have a very interesting panel today, kind of sharing with you where we are in terms, where is UNDP thinking, and how we have been thinking this space of dynamic governance in Asia Pacific. Can you see my screen? I need to share. You can see it, right?
Yeah, now, yes, we can. Thanks.
Yeah, so Philip already kind of set the context of why we need to focus on supporting governments and public institutions to navigate change, disruption, and constant change. He mentioned the different pressures and threats that governments, institutions in Asia Pacific, but across the world, they're facing in terms of climate change, growth and job disruption, geopolitics, demographic changes, and of course, the changes that are related to the emergence of AI and embedding AI, and the changes that come across in our societies, governments, and economy. I'm going to spend a little bit time here on of course, on the governance challenges as well that governments are facing today related to issues around information and misinformation. How do we build ecosystems of information that are transparent, but also that are safe? There are issues related to disinformation, information pollution, as well, increased polarization. And this compounded with trends that we have observed over the years in terms of a decline of public trust in public institutions. So with all of these pressures, we come to an understanding that public institutions and governments today not only need to be strong in the way they are deploying their routinary work in terms of policy making and planning and implementation, but they need to be very adaptable and changes and to shocks and pressures that they are facing today. They need to learn how to govern in an area that of constant change, but I will also add constant complexity, if they are going to be able to deliver effectively and meet people's needs and aspirations and recover trust from citizens. So what we have observed from many public institutions and governance systems across the region is that they have been designed some of them in the 19th century, some of them post-colonial era, and they were designed for a world that was more static and stable than is today. And that's why we really need to rethink how we prepare public institutions and government institutions to be ready for constant change and disruption. And also continue growing this space of public sector delivery and effectiveness based on lessons learned and what's working and not across other countries, right? So what we have observed is that based on the features of public institutions today, they have a capability gap. They were designed to work in sectors and very silo approaches that we see that not often government institutions collaborate and work together, and that becomes an impediment for execution and delivery. They are very reactive. They not always are anticipating and thinking and co-creating long-term visions of development with citizens and different stakeholders. Sometimes this public policy has been captured by elites or by public officials, but not always. And then they follow the short-term cycle of elections, but without being able to continue having a long-term perspective of development. In terms of the legal frameworks, usually the practice has been that they are not flexible, they are not adaptable. Public officials navigate very rigid regulatory frameworks. Once they set KPIs, they need to continue reporting results according to KPIs that probably were designed for 10 years ago for a world that is completely different to today's world. They are output-oriented, as I said. They are focusing on delivering activities or specific services. But in a world of greater complexity, we need public institutions that are able to deliver public goods and public outcomes and not only services and outputs. And then this is a major handicap of governance systems that continue to actually has even gotten worse over time, and is institutions that are very top-down and governance systems that are very top-down. Top-down in the sense that usually it's central governments leading public policy design and formulation, but also top-down in the sense that there is limited co-creation and participation of citizens. There is not always a space for listening to citizens and make them part of policy formulation, execution, monitoring, evaluation. And that becomes a handicap in the way public institutions effectively can respond and deliver for citizens and meeting citizen expectations. So this is where dynamic capabilities become handy and important, and this is where we are advocating for government institutions to become more dynamic. So they are able to close this capability gap, they are able to design systems that will enable public institutions to collaborate and to work across different sectors. They start embedding anticipation as part of public policy and co-creating long-term a vision of development, being more agile and responsive to citizens' needs and different stakeholders in a more kind of effective but speedy way, being able to deliver public value and moving away just to deliver services or outputs because the world has moved on and citizens' expectations and demands are greater. And then, of course, institutions that are able to co-create, to listen and to work with different stakeholders to identify the solutions to the complex challenges that are facing today, being climate change, job creation in an AI era, how to govern with AI today, or how to navigate geopolitics and trade disruptions. basically having an understanding that governments alone don't have the solutions, and to be effective, they will need to co-create and collaborate more with academia, with private sector, but also with citizens. And this is basically just to share with you that's the framework that we have been working on for some time, I would say since 2019 in UNDP, to understand and conceptualize dynamic governance capabilities. We have developed this framework around 3 A's, which is the ability of governments to anticipate, to adapt, and to be agile. So we developed this framework first in Vietnam, where we pilot tested with some government officials in 2019 prior to the COVID-19. But also we have continuously since then unpacking the concept and the framework and working with different stakeholders and governments to see if this is something that makes sense. And this is what we are presenting to you, also looking forward to continue growing this space of knowledge. So anticipation means the ability to foresee potential challenges, opportunities, and change in the environment. For adaptability is the ability to adapt to new information, to changing conditions or shifting priorities by adjusting priorities and plans. And agility is the speed and efficiency with which systems or institutions can respond to new information, to unexpected events, and shifting priorities without major disruption. And all of these kind of attributes enabled by, of course, digitalization, by now AI, but also by citizens' feedback, which is very important, and as well by data, which continue to be quite limited in most of the countries where we operate. Of course, here we present the framework of anticipation, adaptability, and agility, and it looks like linear, but in practice, these are kind of more interconnected attributes that reinforce each other. So basically, here, I don't want to expand too much here, but it's in anticipation, some of the enablers or tools or capabilities that will help government institutions to activate this attribute will be the issues of the ability to use foresight scenarios in long-term planning, policy planning, or development strategy. The ability to use data and map risk ahead, but also to identify opportunities, as Philip said. In terms of adaptability, mostly is about the ability of governments to have to work across government institutions and to drive whole of government coordination, the ability to experiment and innovate, and to continue learning and using feedback and signals during implementation to continue revising course of action and continue adapting as they go. And then, of course, the ability to deliver at speed and with effectiveness. For example, we have seen experiences where government institutions had set up specifically institutional designs or institutions to accelerate execution of a strategy. Mechanisms to design institutions that are more flexible, that are able to listen, to get feedback from citizens, and to react quickly to the demands and shocks that citizens are facing on the day-to-day basis. And of course, the ability to use and incorporate digitalization and AI, but also as well of coming up with new financing instruments, because financing also it's an area that with fiscal space constraint, more and more governments will need to identify new ways of financing. So we have as I mentioned, over the time, we have been unpacking and deepening our understanding exactly how governments are using supportive actions to activate anticipation, adaptability, and agility. I'm not going to expand there on the conceptual framework. What I wanted to do today is to share with you our latest policy brief. It's called Governing Through Change in Asia and the Pacific. Maybe I'm asking my colleagues if you can share the link here. In this policy brief, basically, we cover kind of the conceptual foundation of what we call dynamic governance capabilities for UNDP. We went through the literature and see how academia, but also multilateral institutions are evolving the conceptualization of dynamic capabilities. We unpack how UNDP uses this framework of anticipation, adaptability, and agility. But we did also presented an overview of how governments, based on data, but also based on consultations with governments and stakeholders, how governments and public institutions are starting to embed these capabilities what are the challenges and the progress that they are making. So for now, I just want to share with you 3 conclusions or kind of insights we got from this data analysis and consultations. One is that we see that governments in the region are growing their capabilities, dynamic capabilities. We see that they have been experimenting, but this progress is still very uneven and it still is concentrated in isolated sectors or remains in the experimentation or innovation plan. But there is still room for expanding the way the governments are using and embedding anticipation, adaptability, agility as part of the policy making and public institutional design. The second conclusion is about data is showing us that when countries are able to embed these capabilities, they are experiencing higher human development over time. They experience smaller development losses during crisis, and they are able to respond more effectively to shock and disruptions. We did a little bit of analysis on how countries during the COVID-19 were embedding and using these capabilities of long-term, using foresight or long-term planning, being responsive, or deploying digital systems during the COVID-19, and how these capabilities help them to overcome the crisis, but also how after the crisis they continue to remain focused and on track in the Human Development Index. So there is clearly evidence from the data that the dynamic governance can improve human development. And this is why we are committed to support governments in continue embedding and developing these attributes. The last conclusion is that, of course, this is not enough. Again, dynamic governance and the dynamic governance capabilities are not going to be enough if they are not supported by foundational elements of governance. One of them is having the right political leadership, visionary leadership, and collaborative leadership. Otherwise, and basically the political will at the top that will enable that these capabilities and attributes can be activated and being implemented. Of course, we need to renew legal frameworks and operational models, as well have the right conditions for citizens and different stakeholders to participate in public life, policy making, and being part of what we call democratic governance. So my last slide here, I hope I'm still on time, is just, again, to repeat what Philip already introduced, is what our plan in UNDP, together with the Chandler Governance Group, to support and to continue evolving this space of dynamic governance. So first of all, this year, we're going to develop a set of indicators and a data tool with the aim to collect data and understand better where countries are in terms of adopting these capabilities, embedding them, what are the challenges, what are the gaps, what are the good practices. Then we're gonna, based on this data, we're gonna develop a capability package offer where we can support government institutions to drive legal reforms, to update their operational models, but also to embed these capabilities based on lessons learned and the data. And then again, the third component will be as supporting dialogue and more regional exchanges and country-to-country exchanges to support and to continue growing this, supporting public sector transformation and to make future-ready governance, evidence-based and bring the latest knowledge to the region. So with this, I want to again invite you to read our policy brief, share your comments, join us in this journey of co-creation, and reach out please to us. That's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diana, and I will take over from there. So thank you all very much for having us, and that very thorough presentation means we're going to now have a very tight panel. So my name is Pia Andrews. I am joining you. I am currently with the UNDP. However, I actually have 16 years working in public service where we've done a lot of dynamic governance in countries all around the world. I've also got 10 years in the tech sector to complement and sometimes compete with that public service experience. I'm very delighted to say we're going to have not just a fascinating panel, but we're going to also have a very participatory panel. So I've just posted a link in the chat. I would like to invite you all. You've heard what dynamic governance means to Diana's team and to the UNDP. I really want you, not just now, but throughout the panel, to share your ideas about what does dynamic governance mean to you. You can share a word or a phrase about dynamic governance, and please share as many times as you want, and we'll be reflecting on your insights and your understanding of dynamic governance at the end of the panel during the Q&A. Meanwhile, to introduce our esteemed panel, they will be sharing their experience, their reflections in utilising and embedding dynamic governance across the region. So we have 4 extraordinary people from extraordinary jurisdictions who are going to be sharing. Each will give a fairly short 10-minute presentation, and then we'll be going to Q&A. If you have questions you would like to put to the panel, please don't wait, just put them straight into the Q&A function in Zoom, and I will be collating and synthesizing those to make the most of the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, our first panelist from Thailand, Mr. Suryon Bunkijunnaji, my apologies, who's the Senior Advisor on Competitiveness Development and Policy Innovation in the Office of the National Economic and Social Development Council. I'll hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't have my slides, so I would like to present on oral presentation. Yeah. My office is National Think Tank, National Planning Agency. For the last 5 years, we have been working with UNDP, experimenting something we call Thailand Policy Lab. It's a kind of unit that try to explore and experiment with new tools in policy science, which I think this is the second wave of policy science. There are many new tools, new process, new concept, which is very different from 70 years ago, when I think that is the first wave of policy science. For the last 2 or 3 decades, we actually realized that the conventional framework, conventional thinking, conventional tools, and even the some economics tools for the policy analysis is not very effective in the solving our very complicated problem, a very complex problem in public area like depopulation, inequality, the integration of the water system, and solving of the urban poor, something like this. I think we need to somehow I would say, to reshape our governance system, our public policy system, in order for our public sector, our policy analysis, our policy analysts, our planner, our strategists in every level of the governance system more able to address those complex issues and try to solve integrated problem together, and also try to get to the heart of the people, what is their real problem, what is their issue, and also try to somehow reorient the focus of the public officials, try to focus more on the people problem rather than their advance in their career path, how can they can get promotion, something like this. Okay, so the conclusion will come to the 2 concepts that we actually, there's more than that, but 2 concepts I think is very important for us. First, it's about how to get the public policy process to empathize, that is the jargon now, to understand more deeply about the suffering of the people when they come into contact with our government, when they try to propose their solution, try to present their problem. Secondly, it's about how to mobilize the public organization, public agency to solve those problems systematically, so that solving those problems will not create another bigger problem or another chronic problems. So with the cooperation with UNDP, we set up this kind of talent policy lab and try to explore and experiment with new kind of tools that you might have heard already about: design thinking, foresight, systematic thinking, portfolio approach, um, and also new tools like ethnography, causal ledger analysis, and many more. I think we have been trying to get an impressive result by expecting that we are going to have some kind of policy innovation to solve those problems. Okay, but I have to admit that it's not easy. We seem to anticipate too much or underestimate the difficulty in trying to apply new tools and to get the impressive result. I think yes, we succeed in incorporating new kind of data, new kind of information into the analysis, not just statistic, not just quantitative these indicators. Okay, not just the sorry, Philip, economic tools to solve those kind of problems. And we were not very successful in that. And we try to incorporate the qualitative data, behavioral issues, the narrative story, the complaints of the people in social medias. Those are very, I say, not very systematic. Okay, but at this time we have new kind of tools, social media. I say the data analytics from social medias, and this new kind of tools to quantify or to capture the pattern of complaint, the capture of the pattern of problem, the patterns of participation or whatever. And the bottom line that we are facing that make is not very easy as anticipated in the first place, that we cannot get penetrate to the deep, the depths of the problem there, except one aspect that when we use the approach to empathize more and to listen more to the people, to really understand what is their fear, what is their expectation, what is their concerns, then we get to the point that, oh yes, this is different from what we have heard before or what we have thought before. But after we gather that kind of information and the data and somehow the level of analysis, I think we have the bottom line problem of how to interpret that, how to make it meaningful in terms of empirical evidence that can be submitted to the formal policy platform or to the formal policy decision-making platform at the cabinet level, at the national level. I think we are still struggling for that. And because our team in Policy Lab mostly comprises of the new generation junior policy analysts, but in order to interpret this information, this data, I think we need people who have a really expertise, who have very experiences in the system as well. So I think that are the big challenges. So I'm not sure about the minute. Okay. At the end of the day, we have new concept, we have new perspective, we can gather new information, we can have new tools. But after that, we still need new knowledge, not old knowledge, old wisdom, and new kind of science to interpret that, to as, uh, uh, okay, to capture the meaning, the implication of that analysis, and make it into a policy recommendation that is feasible, practical, and actually hit the point at the bottom of that problem. I think, okay, this is our experience and challenges. Okay, one more. We also jump into the new tool like AI. We are very excited about them. Still, we have to learn it, and we don't know yet how to validate AI outputs in order to make it reliable, trustworthy to the analysis. Okay, this I think the experience that I think can be beneficial to all of you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly for that wonderful kickoff to this panel. Just a reminder, everyone, I'm seeing lots of participation on the Slido. Thank you, everyone that's contributing to that. I'd like to now invite our second wonderful panelist from Sri Lanka, Dr. Roshani Dasaniake, the Additional Secretary of Reforms for the Ministry of Public Administration, Provincial Councils and Local Government. Handing over to you. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Am I audible?
I am afraid to say that you are now not on full screen. If you just want to make it presentation mode, then you're ready to go.
Okay, am I audible?
That is perfect. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share the Sri Lankan experience in strengthening dynamic governance capabilities in the public sector. It's a pleasure to contribute to this important regional dialogue on how governments can better anticipate, adapt, and respond to complex challenges. In Sri Lanka, strengthening anticipatory, adaptive, and agile governance has increasingly become a priority, particularly in response to recent disasters and legal and administrative regimes and the growing need for cross-cutting collaboration across institutions. Allow me to briefly share several practical initiatives that illustrate how these capabilities are being strengthened in our public and administration system with the UNDP assistance. First, Sri Lanka has been strengthening governance through legal and administrative reforms. One key initiative currently underway is the cabinet-approved LoRa Sri Lanka project, which focuses on legal, administration, and workflow reforms of regulatory affairs. This initiative brings together policymakers, administrators, people, and legal experts to structured committee processes to review existing legal barriers and administrative workflows. So it identifies administrative bottlenecks and simplify through cross-cutting coordination across policymakers. The project outcome is strengthen adaptive and agile governance in public administration and eliminate legislative rigids and deliver public value. The most significant of this project is, despite the linear and isolated legal amendment process currently handling by the each individual ministries, this multi-stakeholder table and multi-stakeholder committees allow us to make all these amendments at one table without any legal issues. The objective of this project is to simplify regulatory process, reduce administrative bottlenecks, and improve the efficiency and transparency of government decision making, which is implemented in the divisional administration. So the divisional administration means that is the main government development channel reaching the bottom level people to serve in the government services. Through a series of subcommittee and main committee meetings, the project aims to identify practical reforms that will enable public institutions to respond more quickly and effectively to emerging governance challenges. We are in the process and we expect to conclude the phase 1 within 1 year. The second one, improving access to legal knowledge and institutional learning is another important area of reform. In this regard, we have initiated a project to prepare a code of case laws related to the work of divisional secretaries and the Ministry of Public Administration. This initiative brings together an editorial committee and series of consultative workshops to compile and organize relevant precedents case law that guide administrative practice. Let me brief why significant of this project in the Sri Lankan context. Despite the legislative amendments recently had by the parliament, the Sri Lankan jurisprudence has growing interest to adopt international law and the new law principles through the case law initiatives. So in academically we call as judges made law. So Sri Lankan administrative law mainly now is been adapting these precedents which is not included in the legislation. So the public officials have some issues to understand the current legal context in delivering public services. So this initiative is developing through consultative workshops and editorial committees. Our expectation is strengthen the decision making in divisional administration and the legal clarity. So by systematically documenting these case laws, the project helps public officials make more informed decisions, reduces legal uncertainty and strengths. So this is also a novel project. Consistency in public administration. Importantly, the publication will be accessible to universities and research institutions in all 3 languages, thereby strengthening the connection between public administration governance practices and the academic research. Third, we have focused on addressing real governance challenges faced by the divisional administration and people through an innovative mechanism known as Law Clinic program. These programs bring together divisional secretaries, district level administrators, engineers, disaster management authorities, and the technical institutions and the frontline officials to collaboratively resolve complex legal and administrative issues. Particularly, this program is nowadays we are addressing the post-disaster land, settle the land issues and disaster-related governance challenges after the Ditwa cyclone we faced. One example related to land issues arising from Ditwa cyclone and the associated resettlement and housing construction programs. Disaster management in Sri Lanka involves multiple institutions, and following the cyclone, 19 institutions issued gazette notifications, circulars, and operational instructions related to disaster response. As of last February 26, a total of 77 such instructions have been issued. For local administrators, navigating this large number of complex directives from different institutions was a significant challenge that is affected to the people. Therefore, during the Law Clinic program, lastly we held in Kandy, these scattered instructions are compiled, analyzed, and edited into a comprehensive guideline compendium consisting 522 pages. This compendium highlights the importance of establishing a national institutional coordination mechanism for not only disaster management but also the public administration to establish governance. It serves as a practical handbook for the divisional secretaries and the other relevant officials. In addition to compiling guidance, this Law Clinic program also helps identify practical solutions to long-standing legal challenges. For example, during these discussions, a mechanism was identified. It's a new mechanism, first identified we at this forum, to expedite the acquisition of privately donated lands for disaster-related resettlement, that which is government needed to early resettlement of people. These land matters are being seen as obstacle. Furthermore, several procedural issues related to land administration that had persisted for many years were clarified in this initiative with the assistance of senior officials from the Attorney Generals and the other relevant stakeholders. The legal solutions and simplified procedures identified through these programs will also be documented and compiled into a practical handbook for divisional secretaries, ensuring that lessons learned can benefit administrators across the country. The initiatives demonstrate that strengthening dynamic governance capabilities require both institutional reforms and practical mechanisms that support learning, coordination, and problem solving at the operational level. Turning to the second question on measuring progress, it is important to recognize that dynamic governance capabilities cannot be assessed only through policy documents or institutional frameworks. Instead, we must look at how these capabilities improve implementation effectiveness on the ground. Several indicators may be useful in this regard. One is the ability of institutions to coordinate across sectors when responding to complex challenges. For example, the law clinic programs demonstrate how multiple agencies can come together to address legal problems collectively. Another indicator is the ability of public institutions to translate complex regulations into practical guidance that support frontline officials. The development of the disaster management guideline compendium is one of example of how institutional learning can directly support implementation. A third important measure is whether government systems enable continuous learning and adaptation. Initiatives such as Code of Case Laws and the LoRa project help ensure that administrative practice evolve based on legal knowledge, policy review, and stakeholder consultation. Finally, please allow me to share 4 reflections that may be useful for regional peer learning and for the designs of UNDP's dynamic government capabilities support package. First, governance reforms must be grounded in real administrative and legal challenges. Practical platforms such as law clinics can be effective mechanism for connecting policy reform with frontline administrative realities using multi-stakeholder approach. Second, strengthening coordination mechanisms across institutions is essential. Many governance challenges today involve multiple agencies, and without effective coordination, even well-designed policies may face implementation difficulties. Third, investing in institutional knowledge systems is critical. Documenting case laws, administrative procedures, and operational lessons help build institutional memory and supports evidence-based decision making. Fourth, partnerships with international organizations like UNDP and research institutions and technical agencies can play a valuable role in supporting reform initiatives and facilitating knowledge exchange. In conclusion, Sri Lanka's experience shows that building dynamic governance capabilities requires continuous learning, collaboration across institutions, and a strong commitment to improving the practical functioning of public administration. Notably, all these initiatives were commenced last year, and it is not a long-term work, so we can see the result in near future within 1 year. I look forward to learning from experience of other countries in the region and continuing this important dialogue on strengthening governance for more resilient and inclusive development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful comments, observations, and wonderful experience. It speaks to me because I'm a very big fan in access to justice initiatives. I'd like to now turn to our third wonderful panelist from the Republic of Korea, Ms. Hyaji Kim, the Deputy Director of Governance Innovation Bureau in the Ministry of Interior and Safety. handing over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Hae-ji, Deputy Director of Governance Innovation Bureau, Ministry of Interior and Safety, Republic of Korea. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar on shared experiences of participatory governance across countries. I'd like to highlight the key outcomes of Everyone's Agora, operated by the Presidential Committee on Policy Planning. The Presidential Committee on Policy Planning was launched on June 16, 2025, to develop a 5-year policy blueprint for the new government. It also established the National Sovereignty Committee as a dedicated civic participation body to gather diverse public opinions. The National Sovereignty Committee created a range of communication channels to broaden public participation and involvement in national planning. In particular, it launched the online platform Everyone's Agora, enabling citizens to easily propose and discuss policy ideas. Additionally, it operated Everyone's Agora on Wheels, a field-based program designed for citizens with limited digital access. Everyone's Agora ran from June 18 to August 14, 2025, incorporate public voices into the new government's policy agenda. The platform's name was selected through a public call for ideas, reflecting the government's commitment to open dialogue and citizen co-design. Remarkably, within just 3 days, we received 4,544 creative submissions, and following public voting and evaluation, Everyone's Agora emerged as the official name. Everyone's Agora offered dedicated sections for proposal and discussions, enabling citizens to share ideas on the economy, society, public administration, diplomacy, and beyond. We integrated ID power features, including voice and image input for proposals, automatic display of related submissions, and AI-generated summaries with ministry recommendations. The platform delivered a user-friendly experience for citizens and streamlined management tools for administrators. Citizens could submit ideas through simple authentication, no registration required. They could explore others' proposals and engage through like, dislike, discussion requests, and comments. Proposals advanced to discussed based on their relevance to national priorities, potential policy impact, and timeliness. The discussion board served as a public forum, features 3 to 5 new topics daily across a total of 155 discussions. These were linked to 6 offline forums that further explored citizen ideas from the platforms. AI analyzed key contents, discussion outcomes, and public responses. The committee and government conducted in-depth review to assess policy incorporation. In total, Everyone's Agora received 13,588 proposals, with 6,466 reviews completed by relevant ministries. Remarkably, 237 proposals were incorporated into the policy agenda. Meanwhile, everyone's Agora on Wheels reached citizens with limited online access. This mobile program used counseling buses to visit communities nationwide, listening directly to citizens' voices. Over 5 weeks, it covered 6 regions and 13 locations, gathering 850 petitions and policy proposals. Policies were reviewed by ministries, while petitions were addressed on site or promptly forwarded to appropriate agencies. Through these channels, the committee gathered diverse citizens' voices, reshaped the policy agenda with citizens, and presented outcomes at the National Reporting Conference. The President, Cabinet members, National Assembly representatives, and citizens attended both online and offline. More than an announcement, the conference presented our co-create vision and reaffirmed commitments to citizens. It symbolized the new government's commitment to open communication by creating space to respond to diverse citizen voices. The committee actively used everyone's Agora to engage citizens and reflect their voices in the policy agenda. This approach enabled direct communication with citizens, enhancing transparency and openness of new government. Everyone's Agora embodies our vision of citizens as co-creators of policies, not just consumers. Korea's experience may offer a pathway for citizen participation policies to realize citizens' sovereignty. Currently, Korea government is preparing the Framework Act on civic participation. Once enacted, the National Participation Committee will be established, and the civic participation policy will be promoted systematically and comprehensively. Through this framework, Korea's citizen engagement will reach new heights. The Korean government will continue working hand in hand with citizens to co-create our policies. So thank you for your attention, and I hope our experience has been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was extraordinarily inspiring. Another wonderful example of participatory policy as part of necessarily dynamic governance. And finally, we have our fourth and very patient panelist. I'm delighted to introduce from Singapore, Dr. Aaron Maniam, the Fellow of Practice and Director, Digital Transformation Education, Blavatnik School of Government in the University of Oxford. Handing over to you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Pia, and thanks to my three preceding speakers, especially for the really wonderful insights that you've all shared. I wanted to come at this from the idea of what big lessons have we distilled, both in Singapore and in other countries that I've been observing in terms of adopting more adaptive, agile, and anticipatory practices. And I wanted to start off by saying that I come to this partly from having done futures work in Singapore, and I'm setting up the Center for Strategic Futures back in 2009. Also trying to apply design-centered approaches, human-centered design especially, to the process of policy making and to citizen engagement processes. So drawing from those three examples, I think that there are kind of 7 broad principles that I would really emphasize in terms of the approaches that need to be taken. And I'm going to give the game away here. I've kind of put them all into an acronym, which is the word futures, because I think that'll help us to remember what the items here are. So let's just go through what each of those letters stands for and why in each case these principles matter for the practice of these emerging types of policy making that include things like futures design and citizen engagement, but could well include other things as well, right? The adoption of AI, digital transformation, and other kind of broad aspects of innovation. So the F in the word future stands for the importance of friction and tension. And I think here it's really quite critical to embrace friction and tension, because ultimately moving towards these anticipatory approaches, these dynamic capabilities, as the UNDPs describe them, is extremely counterintuitive. We are going against the grain of human nature. All the things that Diana had in her slide at the start, right? Focusing on silos, being rigid, that is intrinsic to how human organizations function, right? And so in trying to move away from that, we're actually asking people to act unnaturally and go against the grain of their instinct. And a lot of that work, therefore, has to do with reperceiving and kind of dealing with the deep biases and assumptions that systems have and moving towards new ways of operating. And in that process, therefore, the friction and the tension is really, really important. We are effectively, in trying to do this work, trying to be midwives to the new, but also hospice workers to the old, right? To use a phrase that comes out from a guy called Will Keepin, who looks at principles of leadership. And it is this tension and friction that is going to continually address this work. If we're not dealing with tension and friction, if no one's pushing back on the ability that we have to be dynamic, or in the push to be more dynamic, then we're not doing good work, right? And we have to constantly be engendering resistance in the process. The minute people stop resisting, chances are we're not doing anything meaningful anymore. And I say this because it can be really frustrating to deal with these sorts of tensions and frictions, but nonetheless, they are part of the whole process. In fact, I would argue that they're an intrinsic part. And if we're not meeting that anymore, then something is wrong with our work. The first U, the U in the word futures, stands for what I like to call the unhelpfulness of rigid metrics. There's a tendency to try and create metrics in work like this, right? We end up focusing on things like number of workshops organized, or number of times a particular entity has gone through the experience of being trained in dynamic capabilities. That's never going to be good enough, right? Goodhart's law tells us that once you set a metric in place, the metric will end up being gamed. And so we have to be constantly aware that if we are rigid in the use of metrics, then we will end up encouraging this rigid use of gamed metrics rather than actually measuring meaningful outcomes. I think what's really important is, especially because we are dealing with this counterintuitive nature of dynamic capabilities, we have to measure not just the outcomes, we have to measure the attitudes that people have in taking up that work. And that includes, as Suryan rightly pointed out, measuring not just quantitative issues, but qualitative things. It includes measuring whether shifts in perception have happened. And the problem with trying to measure shifts in perception is no one's going to admit to you that they've had a shift in perception, right? No one says to you, oh, I've realized today that I need to be more dynamic, because that gives you the impression that they were not dynamic before. Rather, they will find all sorts of ways to game things and show how they were dynamic in the first place. So we need to find oblique measures for how these things are happening. And sometimes that includes the process of reperceiving, the process of realizing, the process of learning, and finding ways to actually deal with those things and how they can be recorded and observed, even if we don't measure them in a formal way. So principle number 2, unhelpfulness of rigid metrics. The third principle is what I like to call training as a catalyst, right? Training institutions and training activities are important catalysts for dynamic capabilities, partly because in training situations, we don't have to deal with the metric problem of the previous principle. We can deal with the measurement of attitudes in a much freer sort of way. So in Singapore, the Civil Service College, the SAF, the Singapore Armed Forces Training Institutes, have often become seedbeds of new ideas being planted because they provide a safe space for discussions. They allow for difficult questions to be asked, and they allow us to move away from the everyday bustle and routine of things to start asking new questions and start dealing with the world in slightly new and novel or innovative ways. Training can therefore become a really important catalyst. And if you look at every country that's done anticipatory work especially well, they've done it via some kind of training institution. The Canadian School of Public Service, schools of public administration, the UK back in the day when it had the National School of Government in Sunningdale. Training institutes provide that really interesting safe space for these big questions to be asked. And I think we need to find ways to embed this work, right? Once we've got the dynamic capabilities framework even more fleshed out, to embed it into training organizations, because that is where people will have the headspace and the emotional space to actually take on board these new ideas. So that's the T, right, in futures. It stands for training. The second U in futures, so FUTU now, the second U stands for what I like to call the utility of methods, models, and tools. It's really important that we have good methods, models, and tools. And there are methods in futures. Suryan mentioned one of them, causal layered analysis earlier. There are methods in the world of deliberative democracy that we can use in citizen engagement, methods of facilitation, for example. There are methods like design thinking in human-centered design. And in all of these, the methods are not important in and of themselves, but the utility of the methods and models comes because they give us a common frame of reference to talk about these issues across the entire system. In Singapore, we train people in scenario planning, not because we want everybody to become a scenario planner, but because we want everybody to understand what's going on in that work so that they can apply it in their policy applications, but also so that even if they're skeptical, they can get out of the way when everybody else wants to do this work. This kind of common frame of reference, this common linguistic and vocabulary base gives us a way of coming together as a government and kind of overcoming the silos because there's a common frame of reference across the different entities. Same thing with design thinking, right? We teach it to all of our leadership cadre when they are in the first year of work, so that as they move up to in their careers, they will have that vocabulary as a frame of reference to work with other parts of the government. And this helps us to see that these methods and models actually have a great utility because they allow ourselves to internalize these ideas and then apply them in the rest of our systems. I'll do a quick plug here, by the way, as well. The Center for Strategic Futures, which was the entity I set up more than 15 years ago. I'm not part of the team anymore, but they've just produced a really wonderful primer on how they do good futures. And that includes different sets of tools that they've adopted and the kinds of heuristics and models that they're using. I'll put a link in the chat after this if anyone's interested to explore that publication a little bit further. But I think that's an example of quite how useful methods and models can be, and why gathering those methods and models is actually a really useful process to go through. So we get now to the letter R, right, in futures. What does R stand for? R stands for responsibility. And it is really important that dynamic governments and governance capabilities are made the responsibility of someone in the system. It's very easy to just say, oh, this is someone's at the center of government. They have to think about it and the rest of us don't have to worry about it anymore. But someone has to be responsible for it at every agency. Otherwise, no one's going to care. Again, examples of this, right? We did it with futures. We set up something called the Strategic Futures Network, where one deputy permanent secretary in every ministry was made the Strategic Futures Officer of that particular agency and was responsible for bringing out the long term in that agency's work. When we did our digital transformation drive, we identified, again, one deputy secretary as the chief digital strategy officer of every ministry cluster. And that's really important because, if you can't have it be the permanent secretary or the SecGen in other systems, because they're probably too busy running the agency. But you don't want it to be a director either, because directors are doing very important work in specific domains, but they're not responsible for ministry-wide resource allocation and moving of ministry agendas. So we found that the right sweet spot here was to do this work at the level of the deputy permanent secretary, who's kind of the equivalent of chief executives at agency level. And they then can allow the space to actually empower and entrench this agenda in a very dynamic and very living way. So they only do that, though, because it is made their responsibility. They have to be responsible and answerable in their annual appraisal for this work to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then I think we end up with some challenges because, if something is everybody's problem, then it's also nobody's problem, right? And we want to make sure that that attribution of responsibility is done in as systematic a way as possible. So we'll get to the letter E now, right? E stands for expand responsibilities or expand ownership, rather. And here what I mean is to say that there is a temptation often with dynamic capabilities for it to remain at the center of government, right? It stays in prime minister's offices, president's offices, ministries of finance or treasuries, because they are the ones with whole of government responsibility as a natural part of what they do. Now, there's a real danger in this because if we do that, we end up, I think, at some point creating a situation where only the center of government is adopting these ideas, but the rest of the agencies, the policy users, the ones on the ground doing the work, are not actually coming on board with the different ideas. So it's really important that we expand that set of ownership and ensure that it doesn't stay at the center. Some of this happens via the expansion of responsibilities that I mentioned earlier, but some of it also mentions because you need to give ownership to agencies on the domains that they are expert in. Not everybody's going to be able to do expert user-centered design of housing, but you need to let the housing agency do that. What the center of government can do is encourage the use of design capabilities by those sets of agencies. The center of government can also then encourage digital transformation. They can develop infrastructure that can be used by the whole system. They can put in place foresight infrastructure and training budgets that can help agencies to adopt this practice. But ultimately, you will need individual agencies to actually take on that adoption. And you need this constant balance between the center of government and the domain agencies, each playing a different kind of role in this work. And then lastly, for the letter S in futures, I would put down the word sectors, right? It's really important that multiple sectors are involved here. And we've kind of hinted at this in the other speakers where we've talked about multi-stakeholder partnerships. That is definitely one way in which the public, the private, and the people sector need to come on board. But I want to add one other way as well, which is a lot of the capabilities for this work, right? Planning ahead, scenarios, design, digital transformation, even on citizen engagement and citizen participation. Many times the capabilities for these things exist in the private sector for things like scenarios, or in the people sector for things like citizen deliberation and engagement. But if we let those sectors keep the capabilities and government doesn't develop capabilities and skills of its own, then you again end up with a situation of a problem, because you'll have over-dependency and over-reliance on these non-government entities without there being ownership amongst the public sector agencies. So again, in the Singapore case, what we found is government has to develop its own capabilities, not to crowd out the other entities, but so that it can become a more literate consumer and commissioner of projects when it works with and partners or uses as vendors the entities from the private as well as the people sectors. So when you put all these together, right, what you get is a situation where we are managing friction, we are avoiding unhelpful and rigid metrics, we are training ourselves and using training environments as a catalyst for this dynamic capability development. We're harnessing the utility of methods, models, and tools. We are attributing responsibility in a very, very clear way, but we're expanding ownership across the different parts of government, and we're harnessing the potential of different sectors. So that acronym futures, I hope, will be a good guide as a how-to way of actually operationalizing the very, very powerful 3 A's that Diana went through in her presentation. I'll stop there. I'll hand back to you, Pia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I think that it's always a wonder. Design people love to create new acronym frameworks, and I think that's a particularly powerful one. So thank you so much for sharing. Everybody, we have 15 minutes till the end of the entire session, which means we only have a very short amount of time. I'm going to throw just a couple of questions each. What I'm going to do is ask 3 questions, and then I'm going to go to each of our 4 panelists for any last thoughts they have, because we simply don't have time for more questions before I have a couple of last thoughts and then hand back to our colleagues. So the 3 questions I'd like the panelists to reflect on, noting a lot of questions have been asked. First of all, how can dynamic governance help public sector and public institutions to build public trust? That's the first question. The second question is, how do you see dynamic governance being translated beyond looking forward and foresight and forecasting and the like, and into how to make the operating model and service delivery and policy delivery of public institutions more dynamic, number 2. And number 3, there is a lot of interest in new technologies, not just AI, 3D, etc. What do you see to be the most exciting technological opportunity for dynamic governance? So I'm going to start, actually, I'll go from the back forwards. Aaron, given I've got you on my screen already, just maybe 1 minute for your reflections on those 3 concepts, and then we'll be able to just get everyone to have a last word. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Pia. Very happy to start off here. On public trust, I think, honestly, I can't think of how governments would be able to do public trust without some of these capabilities. It's one of those unavoidable sets of realities that we just have to deal with, because this is where the complexity of the governance environment becomes so much more important, right? I mean, we're dealing with far greater demands, and we're also dealing with far greater literacies amongst our citizens. And that means, I think, to do justice to them, we need to actually apply these dynamic capabilities, because otherwise we end up with very static, stagnant forms of government that aren't responsive to citizen needs. And that leads to the second question, right? About how this is not just about looking forward. I mean, I love futures, right? It was one of the best jobs I could have had in the Singapore government. But you're absolutely right. Dynamic governance is about much more than that. It's about looking towards the operating model. It's about getting the details of service delivery right. It's about having the operations and strategy and technology in between integrated in a really powerful way, and all of it looking at the citizens' requirements. And I think the most important aspect there is that it's about learning. Right? We are dynamic when we are learning, and governments therefore need to constantly be learning and be curious to what's going on in the world, and then be curious about how they can do better without necessarily casting recriminations on what's happened in the past. Learning to move forward doesn't mean that what happened in the past was wrong. It means that we are adapting and changing because the world has also changed. And then we lead ourselves into new tech now, right? I'm super excited about AI, I have to say. I think it has risks, definitely. But I just came away from hosting a documentary on AI, and we traveled to a whole bunch of different places. And I think what we realize is we use AI as we are. There's no objective way of using it. And we need to ask ourselves, therefore, what are the assumptions we've already made about the world that we are manifesting through the use of AI? Because dictatorial systems or directive systems use AI in directive ways. Learning systems use AI in learning ways. Systems looking at inequality and inclusion deal with AI in ways that are inherently inclusive. So we need to find ways for that to become better and for us to examine our own assumptions as we adopt that technology. Thanks, Pia. Back to you.
I'll pass to Ms. Kim. Would you like to leave any last thoughts or to those questions?
Please let me share our ideas in Korean. So I think there's someone who helped me interpret Korean to English.
Ling, do we have a translator?
Yes, I believe I saw Sumin from the Seoul Policy Center online. If you could maybe just say hello in the chat, just so we know you're here. Thank you.
And then if you want to speak and then our translator can translate, that should be great.
Yes, I just saw the message from Sumin. Thank you. Please go ahead, Ms. Kim.
네, 정책 환경이 코로나나 아니면 기후변화 같은 것을 통해서 정책 환경이 이제 많이 변화하고 있는데요. 그래서 이제 한국에서도 시민들의 그 정책 참여에 대한 요구가 점점 증가하고 있는 상황입니다.
Sorry, just give us a second. We're trying to make sure that Sumin can speak from their end as well.
Thank you. I might come back just while we get, Sumin, are you ready to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to test the microphone because we've just added as a panelist.
Okay.
The request of the civic participation in Korea also increased nowadays because of the COVID-19 and climate changes. Lots of the difficulties we infect. So Korean government also want to make some some place for the citizens to gather their opinions and ideas. Then we can share and we can use their ideas to make our policy. So nowadays that's why we try to make a framework act about the civic participations. After we expect after we enacted the laws, we expect the committee of participation will be established, and from the committee, the Korea's participation policy will be operated comprehensively. And we try to make a platform online platform for the participation, and we try to use AI features, and we try to adapt AI features at the platform so we can gather the opinions of citizens in the online platform, and they can present their ideas with AI features so easily and comprehensively. Before Sumin is ready, I try to explain our ideas.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's what we have time for, but that was very insightful and thoughtful anyway. So thank you for bearing with us in English. I'll pass quickly to Dr. Roshani for any last thoughts on those comments. Please, maybe just 1 minute. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I wish to spend my 1 minute to elaborate the public trust doctrine, that I believe that I can give more information to the participants to keep this doctrine. The public trust doctrine is the building block of the governance. It's not the part of the governance, it's the building block of the governance. So why Sri Lanka is very connected to this public trust doctrine is, you may wonder, the root of the public trust doctrine is in Sri Lanka in before Christ 306. So that concept has gone to the International Court of Justice, like Hungary versus Slovakia case, and it has transformed to the many jurisdictions. Now it is one of major doctrine in the environmental governance, ensuring the responsibility of the government. That doctrine says the government is not owner of the public property or the people or the governance or the resources, natural resources, lands, including the animals and everything. The government is the trustee of the public service. So this will explain the root of the governance. So we being the public officials and all the public sectors and the governments have immense duty to protect the people and the betterment of the people by ensuring the good governance practices. So that public trust in how we transform into the public sector, introducing a new policy, the public sector should comply 6 areas. First is ensure transparency. It clearly explain the purpose, benefits, and possible impacts of the policy. Secondly, engage the public early. So it allows involve citizens, experts, and stakeholders in discussions and consultations. Third, communicate clearly and consistently. So using simple language and provide regular updates. Fourth, show evidence and data, because the public property is not honor of the government or the public service. It demonstrates why the policy is needed and how it will be improve the situation. Fifth, public trust, ensure and build accountability and set measurable goals and report progress openly. Now it has been transformed to the Acts for like Right to Information Act, and in India, the Public Service Act. Like now it is came to the legislative and the judiciary concept rather than the normative concept. And 6, public trust doctrine address concerns and feedback, and it allows it compel to the public service, listen to the public opinions, and adjust the policy when reasonable. So
thank you.
I think I utilized my 1 minute. I wanted to elaborate that. Thank you.
That was the most pragmatic 1 minute I've ever heard. So to finish our last thoughts before I do just 1 minute to wrap up, Mr. Suryon, would you mind sharing your last 1 minute of thoughts for this event?
Yeah. According to my experience in Thailand, I think we are creating public trust is a long process. But we should start with the consistency in the law enforcement by on the principle of equality before the law, and deliver public service consistently to general people. As for the second issue about dynamic of the governance, I think the what is the legit governance system cost of the obstacle of the governance system that is very rigid is the, I should say, rigid key performance indicators. We need in the future, if you are looking for dynamic governance, I think you need dynamic KPIs for the whole system. Okay, like qualitative qualitative progress, you have to measure it in a different way, like before. Okay, I think Dr. Aaron maybe can make a suggestion on this further. Okay, the third issue is about technology. I think AI is very promising in terms of efficiency, maximizing policy analysis process, public policy process in every level. Its problem is reliability and trustworthy. I think we have to solve that two problems before we jump full scale into utilizing AI for public policy process. Okay, these are my answer to these three issues. Thank you.
Perfect. And before I close out, I just want to quickly say, I think that we have so many examples where almost every government is able to be dynamic, particularly the public sector and public institutions, in time of crisis, in times of emergency. So I think there's a very big opportunity to look at how we work more dynamically in times of crisis and bring those lessons learned and operating models and ways of working into our normal experience as public servants and in public institutions. And with that, I will hand over to Dinesh for the second last before we close out. Over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you see my slides?
Yes, it's just, okay, now it's in presentation mode. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to UNDP and especially Diana Torres and her team for initiating this important conversation. To our participants, a good day from Singapore and the Chandler Governance Group, or CGG. We are an international nonprofit that promotes high-performance government through our training, consulting, and knowledge products. And I'm just going to share why CGG is partnering with the UNDP to measure future-ready governance capabilities, building especially on our experience with the Chandler Good Government Index. So UNDP and CGG are co-developing this Future-Ready Governance Index as part of a larger initiative to strengthen dynamic governance capabilities in the Asia-Pacific. This builds on UNDP's foundational work on dynamic governance, as well as CGG's expertise with the Chandler Good Government Index, or CGGI. So let me take a moment to briefly introduce the CGGI. The premise of our index is that good government matters more than any other single factor in helping societies to thrive. We then turned this abstract concept into a data-driven, non-ideological, and practical tool to help countries promote and achieve good government. Designed for and by practitioners, CGGI's first 6 pillars focus on capabilities under the hood of government machinery. So we have leadership and foresight, robust laws and policies, strong institutions, financial stewardship, creating attractive marketplaces, and building global influence. The final pillar, helping people rise, then measures the outcomes that matter most to citizens. Last year's edition covers 120 countries and over 90% of the world's population. Now, you might ask, why do we need a new index when we have the CGGI? Well, it's true, the CGGI already measures some dynamic governance capabilities. Our indicators like adaptability in our leadership pillar, data capability in our institutions pillar, or budget surplus in our financial pillar, all measure future-ready capabilities to a degree. And this presents an opportunity and a base to build on. But these measures use best available data and proxies. They are not dedicated direct metrics. As we have seen from the earlier presentations by UNDP, dynamic capabilities are increasingly urgent and critical, and they are also conceptually distinct from routine governance capabilities. In an era of climate crisis, technological disruption, and demographic shifts, we need a more focused framework to measure future readiness rigorously and comprehensively. So why create an index? Well, many reasons. First, tracking what gets measured gets done. Here you can see how an index like CGGI helps governments to track their capabilities and performance. An index makes the abstract concrete and creates a shared language for policymakers so that future-ready capabilities become real in meetings and documents. Just asking, are we better this year than last, helps to drive systematic improvement. Second, indices create visibility, which is powerful. It motivates governments by sparking interest among key stakeholders. CGGI itself is reported significantly in the media annually. Politicians care about visibility, as we know. They care about benchmarking against peers and proof points for their reforms. Civil servants appreciate professional recognition and the evidence to advocate for resources. Citizens and civil society benefit from accountability and informed dialogue that indices provide, and donors can prioritize investments and track investments. An index serves all of these audiences simultaneously. Next, indices promote engagement. The CGGI seeds discussion by senior leaders, from heads of government to senior practitioners and experts, and an annual index like the CGGI creates regular and natural moments for public conversations about governance. Next, indices are encouraging. The UNDP's rapid assessment has found that Asia-Pacific countries are already developing some dynamic capabilities. India's CoWIN registered nearly 1 billion citizens on a unified open source platform, vaccinating 25 million people in a single day at its peak. This demonstrates remarkable agility and digital execution. And in Fiji, threatened by existential climate threats, Fiji's Vision 2050 embeds vulnerability assessments, disaster reduction, and climate projections into their infrastructure and urban planning. So an index can encourage governments to see that they are not starting from zero, and what is called for is systematic improvement, not transformation from scratch. A regional index also creates natural peer learning, and Asia-Pacific countries value examples from their neighbors and not just Western models. Finally, indices naturally promote curiosity about gaps. Indices show their value when they prompt leaders to ask diagnostic questions like, why did we score low on policy coordination? It creates a safe space to have these conversations, and we have seen some of these conversations happen in our own engagement sessions with governments around the world. Last slide, indices create pathways for development. An index creates a natural logic for developing capability. Our work supports the development of the index as a diagnostic tool itself, capability assessments, including deep dives into particular countries, peer learning through regional knowledge exchanges, as well as technical assistance. So the index is not just a measurement exercise, it is part of a larger effort to build capabilities in this important area. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And let me hand the time back now to the organizers.
Thank you so much to all the speakers and Pia for your great moderation. So yeah, I'm mindful of the time. I'll just hand this to Diana now for the closing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I first want to appreciate everybody here, especially our stellar speakers and moderator and everyone presenting today, our partners from Chandler Governance Group. Wonderful. Thank you for that very substantive session and sharing of practices and ways of understanding and unpacking this concept of dynamic governance. Thank you all for the participants who remain with us, even we went over the 90 minutes that was set initially for this conversation. We had almost 190 participants at some point, so it really tells us the appetite and the interest that exists from many people in the region and across the world in this subject, that it continues to be evolving and that is underpinned by an appetite for continuous learning of how we can make public sector and government institutions better, gain public trust, and deliver for people. Pia asked me also to reflect a little bit how UNDP internally has been adopting and embedding these capabilities. And it's a journey that started, I think, since I joined UNDP more than 15 years ago. We constantly continue rethinking how we can deliver better, how can we adapt to the development landscape and make sure that we're formulating policies and programs that are going to help our program countries to go ahead of the curve, right? So we have using and adopting system thinking and design thinking and portfolio approaches as new ways of reinvigorating and refreshing our operating models. So UNDP also is in this journey of breaking silos and working more through system thinking, working more on how we can deliver better outcomes by connecting different areas. And this is actually one example, how we can link better our work on human development, our work on economics and inclusive growth together with the work that UNDP has been doing on governance and supporting stronger institutions, more open, transparent, accountable institutions. So, but we do the same when we work at urban level or at local level. It is a journey, as Aaron said before, and it lies between friction and tension. But yeah, certainly we are on that journey. I also want to say that it resonated with me in the futures acronym that Aaron presented, the expansion. We cannot keep this concept of dynamic governance at the center of government. We need to continue expanding the concept to many levels across the multi-level governance architecture. And that's why UNDP not only will be working with Chandler at national level on how we can continue developing indicators and measurement tools that will help us understand how countries are advancing and embedding these capabilities, but we are also working at subnational level, supporting cities to gain more knowledge and understanding of the different tools, methods, and practices that exist across the framework of anticipation, adaptability, and agility. I don't want to take any more time, just we went over almost 10 minutes. So thank you everyone for joining us, especially our panelists and the audience that we have here today that stayed with us until this moment. Thank you so much, and please stay in touch if you're interested to continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.